Hey, my name is Chris Brennan. I'm the host of the Astrology podcast, and this is your year ahead horoscope forecast for the zodiac sign of Aries for 2024. All right, so here's the planetary movements calendar that shows where the planets will start at the beginning of the year and where they'll get by the end of the year. And here are the main keywords or the main themes that are going to be prominent for you this year. I'm going to focus on big picture stuff. So your primary keywords this year are self, relationship, finances, communication, friends, and enemies. So those are the primary topics that I think are going to be the most important and the most active for you this year. And I'm going to expand on that and explain why that is and what some of the transits are that coincide with that during the course of this video. But I wanted to give you the highlights right at the start. All right, so let's jump into it. So the first things first, self and relationships. So this is tied in with the Eclipse series, where we're going to see a continuation of the Aries and Libra eclipse series over the course of this year, which started last year in 2023 and will continue on and eventually culminate at the end of 2024. So this set of eclipses is taking place in your first house of self and your seventh house of relationships. So usually when this happens, a person will go through a period of kind of going back and forth between learning and developing some new understandings of their sense of self, which can sometimes relate to their mind and other times relate to their body, but also just developing a clear picture of who you are and what you want out of life and what that means for you in a very personal sense. So that's the first house and the Aries side of the eclipses. The other side of that is that when a person has eclipses in the seventh house, usually it means a period of major beginnings and major endings for relationships. So sometimes if a person is not in a relationship, they'll find that a major relationship starts at this time. And other times, if a person's in a relationship, they may find that either, in some instances, if the relationship is not going well, that things wrap up or come to some sort of end or conclusion. Or in other instances, if a person's in a relationship, you may just reach the end of a major chapter in that relationship, and you may start a new chapter in the relationship after some developments or events take place that cause some changes for you both. So generally, this just means a period of major beginnings and endings in this area of your life. And so the focus of a large part of this year, especially when the eclipses take place, here's a diagram that shows the timing of those eclipses. So the relationship one is in March, then the self one is in April, and then there's another relationship one in October. So major beginnings and major endings for self and relationship is the keyword for those. Moving forward, the next theme I wanted to focus on and talk about a little bit is the Saturn transit through Pisces, which is going to conjoin Neptune, especially around the June-July timeframe, and the Pisces eclipse that's then going to take place a few months later in September. So this is happening in the 12th house in your birth chart for those of you with Aries rising. So my primary keyword for this and primary theme is going to be restructuring to address nebulous challenges regarding those who undermine you or ways in which you undermine yourself. So I want you to think about and sort of reflect on that sentence, or reflect on some of those keywords during the course of this year, because there's going to be different ways in which that's going to be more or less relevant depending on where some of these challenges are coming from and whether the challenges are coming from outside or whether they're coming from inside. So the 12th house has to do oftentimes with people that we don't get along with in our life, which can sometimes in an extreme sense mean enemies or people that are sort of like out to get you or to cause you problems. So with Saturn having ingressed or having moved into this sector of your chart for a 3-year-long transit about a year ago in March of 2023, it began a period where sometimes people do run into or encounter more issues with people they don't get along with, running up into surmountable difficulties or obstacles with those people that have to be overcome. So, unfortunately, part of the trickiness with this transit is that Saturn is meeting up with Neptune in that sign this year, where it's going to come within 10 degrees of a conjunction. And sometimes Neptune can make things very nebulous. So it's not really clear what's going on. You're not really sure, you know, who the problems are coming from. Sometimes you can make mistakes in assuming things that turn out not to be the case later, or sometimes you can not assume things and then it turns out that you're kind of surprised later that somebody was sort of causing you problems behind the scenes. So these are some themes you're going to have to work with and sort of reflect on this year, just in terms of the people that you don't get along with and how you can restructure your life in order to deal with those people better, either in finding a way to address those problems and still have those people in your life, or in other instances, ways that you can remove those people from your life if it's causing such issues that you just can't proceed further. The other thing to think about with this transit is that sometimes it can have to do with ways in which we sabotage or undermine ourselves. So sometimes a transit of Saturn through the 12th house can be a good time for self-reflection, periods of isolation and self-contemplation, and sometimes just focusing on mental health can be a really good thing to do during the course of a Saturn transit. So this will be the second year out of this 3-year long transit, so you should start to get a handle on it by the end of this year, and you should start making progress towards it. I think especially in September, when that first eclipse occurs in the sign of Pisces in this house, that it's really going to highlight and put more of a spotlight on this area of your life and this area of your chart, which doesn't necessarily have to be bad, but sometimes people can go through a period of introspection at this time, which ultimately, once you emerge out of that period, you'll find that it was quite positive and helpful and was a real period of internal growth. All right, so that's our second transit of the year, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Pisces, and that Saturn transit through your 12th house, which is ongoing. The next transit I want to talk about is some of the positive ones happening this year. The major ones are the Jupiter transits, where transiting Jupiter, this transit started last year, has been transiting through your second house of finances, but this year it's actually going to meet up with and form a conjunction with the planet Uranus, which is the planet of unexpected things. So my primary keyword for this transit for the first half of the year for you is unexpected financial opportunities. That's one of the ways that I can put that together, what that transit is all about for you and those of you with Aries rising in a concise way, because Jupiter in your second house represents growing and expanding financially, and Uranus represents sudden things that happen unexpectedly. So I want you to be on the lookout this year for opportunities for growth and expansion financially, especially ones that maybe are unique, ones that are off the beaten path, ones that you hadn't considered before or might seem like weird or unlike you or sort of unexpected in some way. But pay attention to those opportunities because they could prove to be very beneficial, especially around the May timeframe when this conjunction goes exact in your chart. So that's one of the most positive transits of the year that I wanted to highlight. What's going to happen after that is in June, Jupiter is going to move into Gemini and into your third house of communication. So my primary keyword for that is growth and expansion in communications, mobility, as well as relatives. So the third house, it primarily relates to how you speak, how you write, how you communicate, basically what's inside of you and how you convey that to the world outside. And with this Jupiter transit in the entirety of the second half of 2024, you're going to go through a period where you're going to learn new things about how to communicate more effectively and become more confident as a communicator and more confident sort of broadcasting your message to the world, whatever that means for you, given your individual and unique circumstances in life. So that's part of it, is growth in communication. The third house also has to do with mobility, especially moving around locally. So sometimes this can relate to cars or other ways of getting around town and some sort of benefits or growth or expansion in that area of your life. For some people, this can mean things like, getting a new car, getting a new bicycle, or something like that, like something that is a new development when it comes to mobility for you. The final area is the third house relates to siblings, relatives, extended family, as well as sometimes neighbors or your neighborhood. So this could be a period of growth and expansion when it comes to your relationships with siblings, your relationship with other extended relatives, with something good happening in terms of that, or alternatively, just in terms of your neighborhood and getting more comfortable and finding that there are new benefits and opportunities for you in your immediate environment, like your immediate city, than you have experienced before up to this point. So that's the other probably most positive transit that I see happening this year. And that really ramps up in June when there's a lot of planets that are moving through this sector of your chart, not just Jupiter, but also there's a Venus Cazimi and a number of other transits at the same time. So it's just a very active period for you, especially in June, but the Jupiter transit will extend all the way through the end of 2024. So those are the most positive transits I think happening this year. Moving on, the next section I want to talk about is there will be a Mars retrograde in the signs of Cancer and Leo towards the end of the year. So later in the year when Mars goes retrograde in Leo and Cancer, some of the keywords that I have for that is tensions surrounding children, sexuality, as well as home and parents and private life. So I say that because we're talking about two different houses or two different sectors being activated in your birth chart. The fifth house, which relates to the topic of children, but also other topics related to sexuality, to fun and games and how you do leisurely activities in your life. So with Mars going retrograde there, sometimes it brings up tensions or sometimes even conflicts in this area, or you can find yourself butting heads with the people that are represented by that house. So if you have children, sometimes it can indicate a period of tension for some reason in that area. Because it's a retrograde, sometimes it can involve going back and looking at the past and bringing up past conflicts so that they can be sort of aired out and addressed one last time so that you can then eventually move forward. Sometimes the fifth house also relates, as I said, to sex and sexuality. So it can be an area where there's a little bit more tension there, or perhaps you have some conflict or some severing or separation when it comes to like a lover or something like that is a potential of a Mars retrograde in the fifth house. So the other house that it's really going to be activating, though, is Mars is going to go retrograde also through Cancer, which is your fourth house of home and parents. So a lot of those things that I just said about the fifth house also relate here to the fourth house and to the topic of your home and living situation. So sometimes this can mean there's some greater tensions in your home life for some reason. If your parents are around or if they're still in your life, there can be greater tensions either in your parents' life that somehow affects your relationship with them, or sometimes just direct tensions with them that need to be addressed. So ultimately, this is going to be more or less constructive for different people depending on where they're at in their life and how their birth charts are set up. But in the long term, sometimes it just can be sort of an irritating influence that forces us to focus on addressing issues that arise. And the biggest thing I think is I would just pay attention to initiating conflicts with the people in your life that are represented by these houses during this time, because sometimes things that you think will just be like a minor conflict if you say something off the cuff, or if you say something even like hurtful during this time, can blow up and become a much longer or larger issue than you may anticipate at the time. So I would just be a little bit more reserved about initiating conflicts either with parents or children at this time due to that potential this year. All right, so that's the Mars retrograde transit. And finally, the last transit I wanted to mention is that the planet Pluto is departing from Capricorn and your 10th house, and it's departing from your 10th house of career, and Pluto is moving into your 11th house of friends and groups and social movements. So you're ending a pretty long period going back to 2008, 2009, when Pluto first moved into Capricorn and into your 10th house of career, where you went through this period of transformation when it came to your career, your social standing, and your overall direction in life. And now Pluto is departing this year and moving into Aquarius, which is your 11th house of friends and groups, which usually indicates most broadly transformative experiences with friends and groups. So sometimes this can really deepen certain relationships that you have with friends because you go through some pretty heavy or serious stuff with them. Other times it can end some friendships if they've reached their sort of the end of their life cycle in some sense. But the primary thing is just being open to the potential for having transformative experiences through friends and groups and navigating that as gracefully as you can, even if sometimes Pluto brings up issues of control and manipulation and power plays. And one of the things is that it'll be important for you to be somewhat restrained when it comes to that. Like, don't manipulate a friend for some reason is a potential issue with a Pluto transit through the 11th house. But if you are careful about that and you approach things in that way, then I think that you'll be able to emerge from this having a much deeper and more profound sense of what friendship means for you and the power of friends and groups and alliances in your life. All right, so those are my main themes that I wanted to touch on for this year. Here are the transits that I just talked about. Here are some of the dates for some of those transits for those watching the video version of this, just so you can compare the likely time frames and the periods of importance. And other than that, I think that's it for this horoscope for 2024. So yeah, that's it. So for a more detailed breakdown of the transits this year, check out my 2024 year ahead astrology forecast on YouTube, which you can find by Googling that or going to my YouTube channel. Other than that, for good dates this year, I actually just released a report called the 2024 Electional Astrology Report, where I went through each of the next 12 months and I picked out the luckiest or most fortunate dates for initiating different types of ventures and activities using the principles of electional astrology. So that report is on sale for 15% off right now, and you can get it at theastrologypodcast.com/2024 report. But otherwise, good luck. If you have any questions, post them in the comments section below this video on YouTube. And otherwise, hope you have a great year, and I'll see you again next year for the horoscopes for 2025. All right, good luck and take care. If you appreciate the work I'm doing here on the podcast and you'd like to find a way to support it, then consider becoming a patron through my page on patreon.com. In exchange, you'll get access to some great subscriber benefits. You can find out more information at patreon.com/astrologypodcast. Shout out to our sponsor for this episode, which is the Chani app, the #1 astrology app for self-discovery, mindfulness, and healing. You can download it on the Apple App Store or on Google Play, or for more information, visit app.chani.com. Special thanks to all the patrons that helped to support the production of this episode of the podcast through our page on patreon.com. In particular, shout out to the patrons on our producers tier, including patrons Christy Moe, Ariana Amour, Mandy Ray, Angelique Nambo, Issa Sabah, Jake Otero, Jeannie Marie Kaplan, and Melissa Delano. If you're looking for a reliable astrologer to get an astrological consultation with, then we have a new list of astrologers on the podcast website that we recommend for readings. Find out more information at theastrologypodcast.com/consultations. The astrology software that we use and recommend here on the podcast is called SolarFire for Windows, which is available for the PC at alabe.com. Use the promo code AP15 to get a 15% discount. For Mac users, we recommend a software program called AstroGold for Mac OS. You can find out more information at astrogold.io, and you can use the promo code AstroPodcast15 to get a 15% discount. If you're really looking to expand your studies of astrology, then I would recommend my Hellenistic Astrology course, which is an online course on ancient astrology, where I take people through basic concepts up through intermediate and advanced techniques for reading birth charts. You can find out more information at courses.theastrologyschool.com. And finally, thanks to our sponsors, including the Mountain Astrologer magazine, which is a quarterly astrology magazine which you can read in print or online at mountainastrologer.com. And the Northwest Astrological Conference, which is happening both in person and online, May 23rd through the 27th, 2024. You can find out more information at norwac.net.